book voiceover theater for clarification.
Sir, PFC Howard reporting as ordered.
PFC Howard, I've received a report that you were seen engaging in a homosexual act. I consider this information to be credible. I'll be conducting an inquiry and would like to ask you some questions. But first, I must inform you of your rights under Article 31. Do you understand your rights as I explain them?
Yes, sir, I do. But I don't understand what this is about.
As I said, I received a report that you and another male were seen engaging in a homosexual act in the barracks yesterday.
Sir, I would like to talk to a defense counsel before making any further statement.
Fine, PFC Howard, I understand. The ISG will assist you to get an appointment with an attorney. By the way, if you need to talk with someone else, the only other person you can talk to in confidence is the chaplain. Let the ISG know if you want an appointment with him, too. Soon after PFC Howard leaves, ma'am, I wanted to give you an update on PFC Howard's case.
Good. How's it going?
Well, as you said, PFC Howard decided not to make a statement. He's contacting military counsel through the ISG.
Very good, Captain. Thanks for the update.
A few days later, PFC Howard consults with a trial defense attorney.
Sir, can you explain the process and what will happen to me?
Sure. First, let me cover the possible actions your commander could take and potential discharges you could receive if you were involved with homosexual conduct.
Later, that very same comic book, based on my review of the statements by Sergeants Hall and Johnson and discussion with your chain of command, I have decided to recommend the initiation of separation action. You will receive a memorandum notifying you of the convening authority's action. You may talk to your military counsel about your options. Would you like to discuss it at this time?
No, sir. I think I will see my military counsel before I talk about it.
Okay, you are dismissed. A few weeks pass. ISG, I just received word that PFC Howard's discharge has been approved.
It's all so tidy that way. That's what they say it happens when other people out you. What about when you out yourself? Dignity and Respect comic book? What say you?
Ma'am, can I talk to you?
Sure. Is it okay if the ISG stays?
Yes, ma'am.
What's on your mind, Sergeant Williams?
Ma'am, I've been talking to Chaplain Ayers over the past few weeks, and I think that I may be homosexual.
Stop right there. Before you go any further, I want to be sure you understand that under the homosexual conduct policy, saying you're homosexual can be a basis for discharge. You may also want to talk to a legal assistant officer about this matter.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. I have already talked with the legal assistance officer as well.
Do you understand the Army's homosexual conduct policy?
Yes, ma'am, I do, but I've been struggling with this a long time and decided I had to tell you that I am homosexual.
Do you understand the consequences of what you are telling me?
Yes, ma'am. I needed to let you know, and I do understand the consequences of my actions.
Well then, Sergeant, I will talk with the SJA and battalion commander. I may have some more questions for you after that, so that I can confirm you are serious about this. I also want to make sure that you understand the implications of your statement.
I understand, ma'am. Thank you for your time, ma'am.
No need to thank me, Sergeant Williams.
Later, in the commander's office, so you're certain about this sergeant's sincerity?
ISG, I think so, especially after talking with the platoon sergeant and platoon leader. We don't see any other reason for Sergeant Williams to make this statement at this time.
So what are you going to do, ma'am?
Based on Williams' statement, I may have to initiate discharge procedures, but first, I've got to contact the battalion commander and then get advice from SJA.
Captain Smith calls the battalion commander and then SJA.
Major Storm, sir, this is Captain Smith. I am considering a possible homosexual conduct separation against Sergeant John Williams in my command.
Later that week, how are things going with Sergeant Williams, ma'am?
After talking with the SJA, the battalion commander and I agreed to recommend discharge for Sergeant Williams.
Getting discharged with dignity and respect, according to the Army's comic book on how to do it. We'll be right back.
There is substantial concern about our course in Afghanistan. At some moments, it appears as if we are trying to remake the economic, political, and security culture of Afghanistan. We should know by now that such grand ambitions are beyond our resources and powers. We started in Afghanistan because we thought that's where al-Qaeda was, and we wanted to disrupt any further activity that might threaten us in the United States of America. Now, 10 years later, as we've all pointed out, we are still there. I'm sort of coming to a conclusion here that our idea of attacking the original al-Qaeda people by trying to reform or reshape Afghanistan may not have been finally where we should have started or ended. And the question is, how do we sort of move on? I just think we really have to begin sharpening our pencils as to what our objectives are physically, because the wealth of this country is not interminable, nor are the casualties of our forces and the number of people we have available. We can't fall back on measuring our military and civilian activities in Afghanistan according to relative progress. Arguably, we could make progress for decades on security, on employment, good governance, women's rights, other goals, expending billions of dollars each year without ever reaching a satisfying conclusion. And in such circumstances, avoiding mission creep toward unattainable goals is essential.
What is not remarkable about those statements is the concern about the U.S. war in Afghanistan. Public skepticism about our continued war there is, of course, on the rise. What is remarkable about those statements is that the senator making them is the top-ranking Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee, Richard Lugar of Indiana, Republican, which is a huge deal politically if the Republican Party starts allying with him on Afghanistan and his skepticism, rather than, say, Senator Stay Forever McCain. 3 Americans were killed in Afghanistan yesterday. Another 5 were killed today. The 3 yesterday died alongside 4 English-speaking Afghan interpreters and 3 Afghan policemen in the exact area where I and this show reported on joint U.S.-Afghan policing efforts just last week. We've got more to come. Please stay with us.
George Steinbrenner died yesterday, 2010. Because he was smart enough to die in 2010, there is 0 tax liability to the estate tax.
Republican Senator Jim Bunning, as ever, keeping it classy. He says George Steinbrenner was smart enough to die yesterday so his family could avoid paying taxes on his estate because of a loophole in the Bush tax laws. In Jim Bunning's rush to use the death of a man who had been dead for only about 24 hours in order to make his case against the estate tax, you can see both Jim Bunning's classiness and the Republican Party's enthusiasm for talking about what they think is now going to be their issue for this upcoming election. Yes, there's going to be a fight about immigration and about Republicans berating unemployed people for being unemployed. Yes, there will be a fight about energy. But the big issue you can see Republicans getting geared up for now is taxes, specifically the George W. Bush tax cuts. The 2001 and 2003 Bush tax cuts are set to expire at the end of this year. Everybody panic! And Republicans right now are psyched to campaign on extending the Bush tax cuts, on making them permanent. In Florida, for example, Republican Senate hopeful Marco Rubio just released his 12-step plan to fix the economy. 12 ideas he says will get the economy going again. Marco Rubio's idea number 1, permanently extend the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts. And it's not just the Bush tax cuts that Republicans are psyched to run on. It's the whole Bush tax agenda. Marco Rubio put all of these things down as his ideas, but they're not really just his. The person we have drafted as his tax spokesman tonight can actually help us through these. For example, Marco Rubio idea number 2, cut taxes on American businesses. By cutting this tax, we can spur job creation in America. Mr. Spokesman?
Tax relief is right. And tax relief is urgent. Help for small business means jobs for Americans.
Also, Marco Rubio idea number 3, permanently end the death tax. Mr. Spokesman?
We must repeal the death tax.
Marco Rubio idea number 6, fundamentally reform the U.S. tax code. He says, quote, the U.S. should have a tax system that is simpler, or as the spokesman says,
We simplified the tax code by reducing the number of tax rates from the current 5 rates to 4.
Beyond carrying on the Bush economic and tax agenda that worked out so awesome, other Marco Rubio ideas track very closely with what House Republicans have proposed this year, things like ending taxes on dividends and capital gains and reforming the alternative minimum tax. Taxes is what Republicans want to run on. The problem is they also want to run on being against the deficit.
The American people are saying to us, you're spending too much, you're running up too many debts, and we expect you to do something about it.
I see no shame in wanting to lower the debt off the backs of our kids. I think that's a good conversation to have with America right now.
Republicans want to be the anti-deficit and anti-debt party right now, but they also want to run on George Bush's tax policies. And that is the giant awkwardness at the heart of Republicanism right now.